This is the Song of Mary, which I was confessing to the Wednesday night group as I was reading about it, that it's called the Magnificent, and I had never heard that before. And I kept reading the Magnificent this, the Magnificent that, and I was like, what is the Magnificent? But I figured out, it's Mary's song. It's Mary's song when she goes to be with her cousin. For those of you that don't know the story, Mary has been given an announcement by the angel Gabriel that she is with child. And it's called the Immaculate Conception. That she has not been with a man. She is unmarried. She is engaged to Joseph. I'm going to talk a little bit in a minute about what that meant to her as a woman. But in Luke is the only one that tells this story about when she goes to meet Elizabeth. Elizabeth also has a miraculous pregnancy. She and her husband had tried to have children for years and could not. And they are also visited by angels who tell them that they will have a child. And so this is, in the midst of all of this, this is Mary's song about her pregnancy. And Mary said, "My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliest of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him, from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." This is such an interesting song, the Magnificent, because we've been talking about Living Water United Methodist Church. We've been talking about being deliberately different. Before we built our parade float, before we bought a white Christmas tree, we had a conversation about who we are and what we're about. And I think it was Nancy who came up with the phrase deliberately different. And a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the scripture, which was the lineage to Jesus, connecting Jesus to David and to Abraham, who are significant founders of the Jewish faith, prophets in their own right, and how important it was, and how unusual it was that in the genealogy, there were four women who were named in the genealogy, and all of which had scandalous encounters, and how that was so deliberately different when Matthew laid out that genealogy. And so here we have the choice of parents. We have Mary and Joseph. Mary, most people guess that Mary was about 15 years old, which is about Kevin's sister's Elizabeth's age, 15. Most of the kids that come on Wednesday night to youth are in that range. When we look at our 15-year-olds, we don't see the mother of the Messiah. We see kids who love their cell phones. We see kids who can't put their laundry in the hamper. We see people who forget to turn in their homework. When we look at 15-year-olds, we do not see Mary. Mary, a young woman who was promised to be married and was in the engagement year of her betrothed. And she's in her engagement year, but they have not married, but everyone considers them married. And so you have this young woman who's a faithful Jewish woman whose parents had to have made an intentional decision to let her marry Joseph. Mary's name actually means bitter or grieved. That's kind of sad. And if we look at the four Gospels that teach us about Jesus, Mark does less negative about Mary, and then Luke loves Mary the most. Luke is the one that includes this story, has the song of Mary, and then John, the Gospel of John, doesn't even name her, which is significant. And so we have this young woman who was from a good Jewish family, and she's betrothed to Joseph. Now, most of you know that Joseph is a carpenter. But did you realize that at that time, almost everything is made of stone? So being a carpenter wouldn't have been the most profitable business to be in. Houses were not made of wood. Nobody was paying a carpenter to carve the kitchen cabinets at that time. The carpenter was a lowly position, poor, maybe lower middle income, and yet he was obedient and faithful. And so Mary's parents thought that Joseph was good enough for Mary, and they had this engagement. And so when we think about who the parents of the Messiah, the king who would change the world, was going to be, we have this teenage girl and this poor company. They are not the kind of people that are written about as great and worldly and wonderful. Usually the birth of a new baby is met with joyful anticipation. And I looked up the definition of joy. Joy is defined as a deep-rooted, rapturous emotion, so great to be almost painful in its intensity. Now, when anybody knows they're going to have a baby, or even if they're adopting a baby, they know there's preparation to be done. You can't just go pick up the baby or take home the baby. Number one, nowadays they won't let you without a car seat. You can't leave without it. You need ways to feed the baby, ways to clothe the baby, ways to keep the baby warm. There's all this preparation that has to happen for the baby. When I was pregnant, I was terrible at pregnant. When they say morning sickness, I had 24-hour day sickness. It was awful. It was so hard to be joyful when you're constantly nauseous. And I love food. My family's all about food. When we're unhappy, we eat to make it better. When we're happy, we eat to celebrate that we're happy. We're food people. And to not be able to contain food was a terrible, terrible thing. And I was working full-time, and I was doing part-time youth ministry, and my husband was going to school and working 2 jobs, and it was just a miserable time of life for us. But we would find these moments of joy. John would talk to my belly, and we could feel the baby. And those moments shifted our souls. They were painfully wonderful. And joy is one of those things that is so hard to meet and to hold and to participate in. And since my son Paul is here, I'm going to tell the story. John and I, our favorite movie in the whole world is Parenthood, and it's a rated R movie. So don't run home and think, oh, the pastor said this is a great movie. Don't watch it with your children. It's not appropriate. But it is hysterical in so many ways. And it's about 4 siblings and their relationships to their parents and their children, and trying to be in relationship with their folks and have their own kids. And it's just this constant chaos and joy and stress and so many things in this movie. But at the almost at the very end, Steve Martin's character and his wife are having to go to a Christmas play that their child's in. And they have 4 kids. And the grandma's has moved in with them. And so they're juggling grandma from family to family all through the movie. And the mom is still trying to sew the ears on the costume that goes for the kid who's got a Christmas play in 30 minutes, okay? And so she's sewing, and it's stressful, and it's chaotic, and then the grandma walks in. And she says to Mary Steenburgen, who is the woman who plays Steve Martin's wife, she says to her these words: "Some people like the merry-go-round, but it just goes round and round. she says, but I've always liked the roller coaster. And she talks about how even though it has deep valleys, that it has joyous highs. And that you can't have both the joy without the grief. That you can't have the wonder that is so painful without the sadness that hurts your soul. That there's something about the roller coaster of life that is beautiful and wonderful. And then she walks out the door to get the card. And so Steve Martin walks in and he's making fun of Grandma. And she says, I think she's brilliant. And Steve Martin goes, well, she's so brilliant. Why is she sitting in the neighbor's car? But she tells this beautiful story about the roller coaster of life. And the first time we ever took our son Paul on a roller coaster was over at Bell's Amusement Park. And he was just barely tall enough to pass the line. And I'm 6 feet tall, and John's a little taller than I am. So we have tall kids. So they're pretty young when they hit the line for riding the roller coaster. And I was thinking Paul was like 6 years old. But,
maybe afraid of clowns.
yes, going to Bell's Amusement Park made him afraid of clowns. But we get on the roller coaster, and I'm riding with Paul, and John's riding with Hillary. And I don't know, I bet a lot of you have been on the Bell's roller coaster. And so we go through the whole roller coaster, and Paul is death gripping my arm through the whole thing. It's screaming. I mean, you could see his stomach. His mouth was so, he just went through the whole thing. And then I was feeling so guilty. Oh my gosh, he's too young for this. I shouldn't have taken him on the roller coaster. He's never going to ride again. Because I had a brother who wouldn't ride roller coasters, and I thought, I'd turn Paul into my brother. And we step off. His eyes are teared. He's breathing hard, and he goes, can we do that again? And I was just like, okay, maybe I did not scar you for life. But I think one of the things that John and I love about that story, about comparing so often times of our life that are awful, we wish for the merry-go-round. We don't want to grieve. We don't want to hurt. We don't want to lose people we love. We wish for the merry-go-round because it's steady and it's safe and it's easy. But the reality is, the roller coaster, it takes us to heights we couldn't imagine. That without feeling deeply, both when it is sad and when it is wonderful, that we can't have one without the other. And so, in our Christmas season, when we read about these parents, Mary and Joseph, Joseph could have had Mary stoned to death because she was pregnant and they were unmarried. That Mary faced in the midst of the joy of a new baby, this fear that she would never have it. That Joseph wouldn't believe her crazy and insane story that an angel had showed up and said she was going to have a baby. I mean, it makes no sense at all. And then here is Joseph, this quiet, obedient man who instead of reacting emotionally, immediately, and disowning Mary, he sleeps on it. And he prays about it. And the angel Gabriel shows up again. And he says to Joseph, it's okay. This is the Messiah, the chosen one. And so Joseph does the thing that probably made him a fool in the eyes of his neighbors and of his community. He takes Mary as his own. And he protects her, and he protects the baby. It is so deliberately different than anything that could have been predicted about the coming of the Messiah. At that time, in Jewish belief, the Messiah, and still today, the Messiah is a great king and will change the world. And instead, we get this humble, lowly, poor couple who are given the opportunity to have a baby. The thing about joy is it is not in short supply. It is not something we run out of or we have to stand in line for like we do Christmas gifts at this time of year. Joy. We all have the opportunity to participate in joy. And if our lives are so busy and difficult that when a child goes to hug you, it becomes a chore. Or if you walk out your front door and you don't notice a flower has bloomed or a beautiful leaf has fallen, then we are too busy. We are not prepared to be joyful. We have to allow it to happen. We have to make room in our lives, in our to-do list, in our chores, and all of those things for joy. I wanted you to see this quote. I just think it's beautiful. The spiritual life is a journey into the fullness of joy. No, it isn't always joyful. But as you grow in your relationship to God, you grow in your ability